Yogscastia High, Zoe and Fanfic. Chapter 1, New Kid. Zoe's Point of View. 8:46 a.m. Oh no. No, 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 no! I screamed as I ran down the street. I'm gonna be late! I cried. The pavement seemed to be made of tar. I couldn't move fast enough. School started at 9 o'clock. I had only just left the house. I ran until my feet were numb, and I couldn't run anymore. I checked my watch. 8:50 a.m. I sighed with relief. I'd run 3 streets in 4 minutes. School was just another street away. I started walking. My feet couldn't dash or sprint, so walking was my last method. Suddenly a black car rolled up beside me. I stopped and stared as the passenger seat window rolled down. The first thing I saw was a boy, around my age, with sticky-uppy dark brown hair and a stripe of hazel near the side. He was wearing a silky mask on the bottom of his face, had a cut through the middle, where his mouth was. Excuse me, but do you know where Yogscastia High is? He asked. His voice was deep and soothing, with a strong Swedish accent. Oh, yeah. I'm on my way there now, I panted. He looked up at me. You seem tired. Hey, let's make a deal. If you give us the directions, we'll give you a ride there, he said. I nodded. Okay. As I opened the back door, I saw the driver. He had black combed hair and dark brown eyes. He wore a spotty green shirt and had dark blue denim jeans on. The boy I spoke to looked back at me. He was wearing a grey no-sleeve top with reddish-brown trousers. His coat was a long purplish-black cloak. It was made from the finest silk I'd ever felt. Then I realized that the mask he was wearing was made from the remains of the cloak, where it had been ripped. I saw movement in his mask. He was smiling. I'm Rivian, by the way. That's Teep. He pointed to the driver. He can't speak, so he uses sign language. I turned to the driver and saw him smile and wave through the mirror. I smiled back. I'm Zoe, I giggled. And don't bother teaching me sign language. I already know it, I smugly declared. Rivian giggled. If you say so. He turned back to the window and rolled it up. Anyway, can we have the directions now, Zoe? Teep signed. Oh yeah, just go straight ahead, then turn left and turn right, I said. Teep followed the directions and parked his car in the school car park. We all got out and stared at the massive building. I thanked them for the ride and skipped along the pavement to the school entrance. Suddenly I felt someone tap on my shoulder. It was Rivian again. Hey, Zoe. I'm kind of the new kid around here, and I'd really appreciate it if someone showed me around. He blushed. Of course, I giggled. I grabbed his hand and dragged him around the school, showing him the rooms in his locker. When we came to my first class, I let go of his hand and told him to come in 10 seconds after I went in. I don't know why, but I did. Rivian's point of view. Zoe told me to wait outside the door. Her grey tank top outlined with green and her dark grey shorts flew through the door as her flower red hair was thrown out of my sight. 1, 2, 3, 4, I counted to myself. Teep had went to his class and I stood in the corridor counting. I must have looked like such a weirdo. 5, 6, 7, 8. I looked around and quickly added, 9, 10. I pushed open the door and walked in. The teacher stared at me as I looked around the classroom. Zoe stood out like a blue spot on a red sheet of paper. I think the most noticeable thing about the second was her bright green knee-length socks, followed by her bulky boots. Young sir! The teacher shouted. Why have you walked into this classroom without your name on the register? He boomed. I'm new here. It's my first day, I replied. The teacher shrank and turned red. He cleared his throat. What is your name? He asked. Vivian Underborn. I smiled and looked at the empty seat next to Zoe. Right then, please take your seat next to, The teacher scanned the room looking for an empty seat. The only one was next to Zoe. Aha! Go sit next to Zoe. She's the one with the bright red hair. The teacher laughed. I walked up the steps and remembered row 3, seat 6. I sat down next to Zoe and couldn't help but smile. I saw her eyes look in my direction, then back at the teacher. I stared at the teacher and listened. Today you will be studying the wonderful world of science. Duncan, would you care to come up front? The teacher stated. A boy in a lab coat stood up. He had blonde shaggy hair and green-plated goggles on top of his head. He wore thick rubber boots and dark grey trousers. I heard some girls squealing and sighing as he walked up. I even heard some whispers like, OMG, Duncan is so hot. Why do they have to fancy her and not us? Zoe should feel honored that Duncan likes her. My ears pricked up at the sounds of Zoe's name. Duncan was writing on the blackboard and the teacher was in awe. It was now or never. What's this about Zoe and Duncan? I whispered to the girls behind me. They looked down at me and bent over to tell me. Well, new kid, Duncan is a hottie around here and you look like a hottie too! The girl next to her squealed. The other girls glared at her, though I couldn't help but blush. A girl had just called me hot. Anyway, before I was interrupted by Mindy, she glared at the other girl. Duncan is a hottie around here, and everyone knows that he has a crush on Zoe. Heck, even Zoe knows. But Zoe, for some reason, doesn't like Duncan in that way. Duncan, however, won't give up on her, and Zoe won't give in to him. It's so unfair, the girls whined. Isn't that amazing, everyone? The teacher squealed. Everyone looked up at the blackboard. Loads of numbers were all scribbled on, and Duncan stood at the side, trying to look embarrassed. 50 equations in 2 minutes! Unbelievable! Screamed the teacher. You may return to your seat, Duncan, the teacher said, regaining his voice. As he walked back to his seat, Duncan winked at Zoe. She smiled, but looked kind of fed up. She gave him a weak wave and turned her attention to a strand of loose hair, blowing and twirling it. When the bell went, I followed Zoe down the corridor. Hey, you okay? I asked. Yeah, she sighed. What's the matter? Is it something to do with that Duncan dude? She nodded. I saw a tear roll down her cheek. Duncan's just... People are saying that he loves you, I said. She burst into tears and pushed herself into me, forcing me into a hug. That's just it! Everyone says me and Duncan should go out, but I don't get the option to say no, Vivian! She cried. I looked down at her. Her head was resting on my chest and her arms were wrapped around my back. I felt a wet patch on my chest where she was crying. I patted her back, then put my arms around her. She looked up at me. I don't love Duncan, Vivian. I don't, she weakly cried. It's okay, Zoe. I know how to solve it, I answered. She looked up. How? She whimpered. Love someone else, I replied.